Ukraine is reclaiming its territory, while Russian soldiers lose coordination? It may sound bizarre, almost unbelievable, but this is not speculation, and it's not propaganda. This is what is actually happening on the battlefield right now. Something significant is happening along Ukraine's southeastern front, and it isn't getting nearly enough attention. According to reports from the Kyiv Independent and United 24 media, Ukraine has launched a coordinated counteroffensive in the Oleksandrivka direction, and the results are already reshaping the battlefield in ways that Russian commanders almost certainly did not anticipate when they drew up their 2026 campaign plans. Let's start with what triggered all of this, because the tactical story here begins not with bullets or bombs, but with a satellite signal going dark. Russia lost access to Starlink. That single development, which might sound like a minor logistical inconvenience to someone unfamiliar with modern warfare, has effectively blinded and deafened Russian units across significant stretches of the front. When you combine that with a partial restriction on Telegram, which Russian soldiers had been using heavily for unit coordination, you get something extraordinary. You get an army that can see the enemy coming but cannot talk fast enough to stop them. Ukraine saw that window open and walked straight through it. The Kyiv Independent reports that the bulk of Ukraine's 2026 push against Russia has concentrated in the Oleksandrivka direction. To the casual observer, this might seem like a fight over a small village that barely had 4,000 residents when Putin launched his full-scale invasion. But anyone who understands Ukrainian geography understands immediately why this location matters so much. Oleksandrivka sits at the intersection of three oblasts that Russia has been fighting over for most of this war: Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, and Dnipropetrovsk. Russia wasn't just attacking those regions for symbolic reasons. It had concrete operational plans to use the territory around Oleksandrivka as launching pads for deeper strikes into Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk in 2026. Those plans are now in serious jeopardy. What's also worth understanding is the broader context that makes this counteroffensive so strategically coherent. Back in September, Ukraine executed a similar surge in the Donetsk direction. That operation recovered approximately 160 square kilometers of territory, which Ukraine then fortified with considerable skill. The result was that Russia's much-advertised push toward the city of Pokrovsk turned into a grinding, bloody disaster for Moscow. Russian forces threw manpower at those newly fortified Ukrainian positions and paid an enormous price for every meter they gained. Ukraine essentially converted recaptured ground into a killing field. Now, watching what's unfolding near Oleksandrivka, it becomes clear that Ukraine is running a very similar playbook, and Russia appears to have not learnt the lesson. On the ground level, the operational mechanics of this counteroffensive are remarkable. Reports from the Ulivka and Oleksandrivka directions describe Ukrainian armoured columns advancing as spearheads, pushing forward to break through multiple layers of Russian defensive infrastructure. These aren't light infantry skirmishes. These are coordinated combined arms movements involving armoured vehicles, concentrated artillery support, and drone coverage working in concert. According to geolocated footage reviewed by military analysts, the 475th Separate Assault Regiment advanced armoured vehicles toward the front line through the village of Fedorivka, doing so even under direct attack from Russian fibre-optic guided drones. The vehicles maintained momentum under fire, reached their objectives, and infantry was deployed directly onto Russian fortifications to clear them. Shift your attention away from the devastated towns of Donbass and the shattered streets left behind by constant bombardment. Instead, look toward the south, where quieter but extremely decisive developments are beginning to reshape the course of the war. After enduring months of sustained Ukrainian pressure, Russian defensive positions began to weaken. Continuous strikes, logistical strain, and mounting battlefield losses forced units to abandon previously held ground. The clearing operations themselves were systematic. Ukrainian soldiers moved through Russian defensive positions, throwing grenades into dugouts, engaging enemy troops with small arms and pushing the line further back before consolidating. Along the Haichur River, Ukrainian forces cleared key Russian positions and pushed Russian units further away from the right bank. A second vector of advance unfolded through the village of Vasilivka, where Ukrainian infantry clearing a tree line discovered remnants of a Russian unit sheltering in a dugout. According to the reported account, Ukrainian forces offered surrender multiple times. When there was no response, FPV drones were called in for a precision strike. Following the explosion, a Russian soldier emerged and surrendered. That single image captures something important about the psychological and operational state of Russian units in this sector right now. Russia had built serious defenses in this area. These weren't improvised positions. There were trenches, razor wire, anti-tank obstacles including dragon's teeth, ditches designed specifically to stop armoured vehicles, and extensive minefields layered in depth. Ukraine breached those defences anyway. The combination of suppressed Russian drone surveillance due to unfavorable weather conditions, degraded communications due to the loss of Starlink and restricted telegram access, and a high concentration of Ukrainian artillery support created what military analysts would describe as a compressed decision cycle for Russian commanders. They couldn't observe, couldn't communicate, and couldn't respond at the speed the tactical situation demanded. Ukraine exploited that compression aggressively. According to United 24 media, Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi confirmed that operations are ongoing in the Oleksandrivka direction, which strongly implies that the advance has not reached its limit yet. The momentum appears to be sustained rather than a single sharp strike. That matters because it suggests Ukraine is not simply raiding Russian positions and falling back. It is pushing to hold and fortify what it recaptures, which is exactly what it did in Donetsk last September, with such devastating follow-on effects for Russian offensive capacity. Officials also stated that several Russian formations have suffered serious losses, reducing their ability to carry out offensive missions. Ukrainian armoured units were said to have played a key role in shifting battlefield momentum and stopping earlier Russian advances. The communication breakdown on the Russian side cannot be overstated as a factor here. Russia's best current solution to the loss of Starlink has been reportedly the use of balloons carrying 5G terminals. Those balloons fly for only a handful of days at a time. That is not a strategic communication solution. That is a patch on a wound that keeps reopening. Starlink provided Russia with the kind of dense, reliable, low-latency connectivity that allowed frontline units to coordinate rapidly and pass targeting data back up the chain of command in near real time. Without it, the information architecture that Russia had come to depend on collapses into something resembling the slower, more fragmented communications of a previous era. Ukraine does not have that same dependency right now, which means every day the gap exists is a day when the operational initiative sits with Kyiv rather than Moscow. What Ukraine is reclaiming in this offensive is not just territory, it is reclaiming strategic geometry. The land being liberated around Oleksandrivka was territory that Russia planned to use as the foundation for its next major push. Losing that foundation doesn't just mean Russia loses a few villages, it means Russia's timeline for deeper operations into Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk shifts backward, potentially by many months, while Ukraine uses the same ground to construct the defensive depth that will make any renewed Russian push even more costly than the last one. Ukraine did this successfully once already. Russia has demonstrated no credible answer to the strategy. There is also a message embedded in the operational method. Ukraine is not waiting for a ceasefire to hand it back land that should never have been taken. It is taking it back through action, and it is doing so at a moment when Russian forces are structurally disadvantaged by their own communications failures. That timing is not accidental. Ukrainian military planners identified the window created by the Starlink disruption and moved quickly. The armoured columns, the drone suppression of Russian surveillance, the artillery concentration, all of it points to an operation that was prepared in advance and launched the moment conditions were favourable rather than ideal. For the soldiers on the ground doing this work, the reality is harder than any strategic summary can convey. Advancing armoured vehicles through villages while fibre optic drones hunt them, infantry storming trenches backed by razor wire and anti-tank ditches, clearing dugouts one by one. These are not abstract manoeuvres on a map. They are close, dangerous, exhausting acts of violence conducted by people who understand exactly what is at stake. The footage coming out of this offensive shows Ukrainian units moving with discipline and purpose, but it also shows how brutal this kind of fighting remains regardless of which side holds the tactical advantage. What the Kyiv independent and military analysts on the ground are describing is not a surprise raid. It is the opening phase of what could become a sustained operational campaign to reshape the southeastern front in Ukraine's favour, before any diplomatic process forces a freeze on current positions. Every kilometre recaptured now is a kilometre that cannot be used as a springboard against Ukrainian civilians later. Every Russian fortification cleared is a fortification that cannot anchor a future offensive. Ukraine understands this calculus with a clarity born from nearly 4 years of fighting for its own survival. Russia lost its internet connection, Ukraine picked up the initiative, and right now, in the fields and tree lines and dugouts along the Haichur River, Ukrainian soldiers are taking back what was always theirs: